returns to Venezuela following the latest attack on the country's power grid. The U.S. government announced it will fast-track the deportation of thousands of migrants. And Boris Johnson is set to take over as Prime Minister of the United Kingdom after being selected as Conservative Party leader. Hello and welcome to Telesur English. I am Stefania Bravo. This is from the South. The restoration of power continues in Venezuela after an electromagnetic attack on the country's Guayana hydroelectric power generation system on Monday left a large part of the country in the dark. Our correspondent in Caracas, Leonel Retamal, has the latest.
We are going around Caracas to see how people are dealing with the restoration of power. Early in the morning, another partial outage was recorded in some areas, but power was quickly restored. Little by little, the city is returning to normal, as power in Caracas is fully back. Meanwhile, some regions of the country report power is fully back, while others are still dealing with a full blackout. Nonetheless, public services are fully functional. Banks are open, despite the fact that on Monday night, the communication minister announced all work and school activities would be suspended on Tuesday. Despite this, people have been coming out to find methods of transport to go to work and continue with their daily lives. We'll continue reporting from the streets of Caracas as power gradually returns to the entire country.
After the power went out in Venezuela at around 4 p.m. local time, contingency plans were put in place to prioritize citizens' needs. In Caracas, alternative transport was provided for everyone who usually relies on the metro.
This was a political sabotage, nothing else. They're trying to sabotage our government. They want to paralyze Venezuela, but they are not going to win. As Venezuelans, we are working people, and no matter what, we will move forward.
In the face of this latest attack, the authorities put into motion a new system to return power to the country as soon as possible. The system that was first developed after the previous round of attacks in the power grid back in May.
The Bolivarian government has implemented protection protocols, which allow us to confirm we are in the process of restoring power, and hope to finish doing so in the shortest time possible. As such, we have activated contingency plans to provide transport and water for all citizens, as well as to provide all necessary aid to hospitals and health centers. We have also deployed security forces to guarantee the peace and safety of all citizens.
Power is being restored in stages across the country. As a precautionary measure, the government cancelled school and work on Tuesday. So far, this is the fourth electromagnetic attack against Venezuela's power grid. Back in March, Venezuela suffered a massive blackout as most of the country went dark for 11 days in a row. Following an investigation, the government provided proof that this had been a coordinated attack on the Guri hydroelectric plant.
Moving on, the government of the United States has announced it will fast-track the deportation of migrants without allowing them to appear before a judge. The new regulation will apply to any person living in the U.S. without papers for less than 2 years. Human rights groups says that up to 300,000 people could be targeted under the plan. The move has been condemned as a violation of rights and would rip apart thousands of families, devastating entire communities. The Donald Trump administration is keen to be seen as tough on migration. And the U.S. president has threatened to punish Guatemala with tariffs and taxes on its remittances after it allegedly backed away from an immigration agreement. Via Twitter, Donald Trump accused the Guatemalan government of breaking its initial promise to sign a safe third country agreement. That would mean that migrants from other Central American countries who pass through Guatemala would have to seek asylum there. Mexico has refused a similar agreement. As the immigration crisis in the U.S. worsens, it has now been 45 days since the Mexican government signed an agreement with the U.S. on curbing the flow of migration towards its northern border. On Monday, authorities provided a report on the advances made during these past few weeks.
In 45 days, Mexico's government has reduced the number of migrants entering the country through its southern border by 36%. These migrants mostly come from Central American countries like Honduras, Guatemala, and El Salvador, with high hopes of seeking asylum in the United States.
The measures Mexico has taken were according to its own laws and policies, and they are proved to be effective. We have been able to address the issues of letting people passing through our territory, but only those who are doing so according to our policies.
President Andrés Manuel López Obrador says he will maintain the current migratory plan, which includes the deployment of the National Guard at several border points.
We believe the best is to keep the flow of migrants organized in a way that we can care for the migrants and respect their human rights. And we will do so little by little because it's not easy to solve the issues behind migration.
This report comes just a day after US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo visited Mexico, and 45 days after the Mexican government signed a migration deal with the United States in order to avoid an initial 5% of US tariffs on Mexican exports.
There was no discussion about the third safe country, which I insist is a proposal that was on the table, because in those days it was a very difficult situation, but we did not accept it.
The Mexican government's short-term plans for migration include investments for migration centres and also continuing with the development plans for South American countries like Guatemala, El Salvador and Honduras.
Actually, this is not going to stop migration, but will simply change a little the number we have seen so far in terms of forced migration. And I'm not talking about the last few months, which is a more evident migration, but something that has been going on for at least 15 years.
Meanwhile, operations to stop human trafficking continue as well. Trucks filled with undocumented people are not uncommon on the roads. And in these cases, Mexican authorities say that not only the drivers will be investigated, but also the owners of the vehicles used for human trafficking.
The Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif is in Bolivia, where he has met with President Evo Morales as part of his tour of Latin American countries. The two exchanged gifts and discussed multilateral issues, as well as cooperation on different areas, particularly in nanotechnology. Prior to their meeting, Zarif attended a ceremony at René Moreno University. He addressed the attendees by applauding the Bolivian government for its independence and power. The president of the Dominican Republic, Danilo Medina, has announced that he won't modify the country's constitution to be able to seek re-election for a third time in 2020. This comes after months of protests against the constitutional reform.
When I reach the end of my second term and leave my post as president, I want to be able to go on the streets and walk like an average citizen and look people in the eye with the peace of mind of someone who fulfilled his duty with honesty and humility.
Boris Johnson will take the mantle of British Prime Minister from Theresa May after winning the Conservative Party's leadership contest. Johnson took 66% of the vote against his rival Jeremy Hunt in an internal election heavily criticized as undemocratic and unrepresentative. Unlike in a general election, only members of the Conservative Party participated to choose who would lead the UK. The Conservative Party membership has an average of age of 57. Around 160,000 votes were cast with Johnson's support, limited to fewer than 100,000 people.
We're going to get Brexit done on October the 31st. We're going to take advantage of all the opportunities that it will bring in a new spirit of can-do. And we are once again going to believe in ourselves and what we can achieve. And like some slumbering giant, we are going to rise and ping off the guy ropes of self-doubt and negativity.
A number of high-profile ministers, including Finance Minister Philippe Hammond, have announced their intention to resign before Johnson takes office in protest at his intention to take the UK out of the European Union without a deal. The Conservative Party remains split on Europe, despite ostensibly being the party of Brexit. So Boris Johnson is already facing resignations from some conservative ministers. We asked Telesur's political analyst Tariq Ali whether the new prime minister might be forced to call early elections.
That will depend on how the Conservative Party weathers the storm. Brexit, of course, is the key issue. If Boris goes for a no-deal Brexit, which some of his supporters want, he will lose the confidence of many Conservatives who could then vote against him in Parliament, triggering a general election. If he doesn't go for a no-deal Brexit, but effectively accepts a slightly amended version of Theresa May, his predecessor's deal with the EU, the hardcore Brexiters will give him a lot of trouble. So I think what we have to understand is that despite this farce and so-called show of unity, the Conservative Party, the traditional ruling class party of Britain, is deeply split and divided. And 51% of Boris's supporters in the Conservative Party have said they want a no-deal Brexit, they will go with him, and if the Conservative Party splits, so be it. So it's nothing for him to boast about. The other thing he is promising is to defeat Jeremy Corbyn. And I have to say this, that the coverage on the BBC has been appalling. Instead of getting a supporter of the Labour Party leadership to take this on, they find some old Blairites who hate Corbyn almost as much as Boris Johnson and put them on the screen and then pretend that this is a sort of objective discussion. So we are in a critical situation in Britain now, and I think the only serious way forward is a general election. Will it happen this year or the following year? We don't know. But I think Boris will probably be a very short-lived prime minister.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Hundreds of Sudanese university students rallied in Khartoum demanding justice for fellow students killed in the months of political unrest. As riot police were deployed in the area, students chanted, "Blood for blood, we don't want compensations," while holding photographs of students killed over the past 7 months. The rally follows wide discontent with a power-sharing deal signed last week between protest leaders and the military, as negotiations have yet to address accountability for those killed since December.
The martyrs of the Sudanese students who died, who gave their life for this country, and who were so adamant to see a change. Today, this demonstration, this process comes in their memory, and also to tell the authorities that we have missing persons, and they should be known, their whereabouts, where are they, and also this is the right of their families, to know their whereabouts.
Unidentified attackers in the Democratic Republic of Congo ransacked and set fire to a health center tasked with sorting Ebola cases. This is now the 5th attack on health centers in the country. Local residents have since called for more security forces to be deployed at the Ebola centers. According to the World Health Organization, this violence has complicated efforts to contain what has become the second deadliest Ebola virus outbreak in history. Over 2,500 cases have been reported, with about 1,700 deaths since the outbreak began last August.
We were getting a lot of sick people. This whole community was coming to get treatment here, with 20 to 25 patients a day. Let the government ensure the safety of its health workers. The authority of the state must be restored in this environment that is beyond the control of the government.
In Gambia, an army officer has accused former President Yahya Jammeh of ordering the murder of a journalist in 2004. At a Truth Commission hearing, the officer said he and two others shot at the journalist's car on the outskirts of the capital, Banjul. He added that Jammeh later gave him an envelope with dollars inside and a note which read, "Sign of appreciation from the big man." Deida Hidara, the former editor of the Point newspaper and a correspondent for AFP, was reportedly killed for writing about rampant corruption during Jammeh's rule. The former president has denied the killing, saying that Hidara's love life had led to her murder.
I trust that the Gambian authorities will take the necessary steps to punish all the perpetrators and all those involved in the killing of Daida Hidara, and even put pressure on countries that we have ties with to bring Yahya Jammeh back here to Gambia and have him brought to justice.
Kenya's finance minister, who was arrested on corruption charges, has appeared in court. Minister Henry Rotich and 15 other top officials appeared in a court in Nairobi over corruption charges linked to the construction of 2 dams. He pleaded not guilty. The other co-accused also faced charges ranging from conspiring to defraud and financial misconduct. Hundreds of inmates staged a riot at Cameroon's central prison in Yaoundé. Many detainees, largely from 2 Anglophone regions of Cameroon, say they are illegally detained and have called on the international community to intervene. Police stormed the prison and used tear gas to disperse the prisoners, injuring several. The Condé maximum security prison is where the vast majority of Anglophone activists from Cameroon's 3-year-long crisis are kept. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. The leader of the Spanish PSOE party, Pedro Sánchez, has failed in his first attempt to form a government. Sánchez became the prime ministerial candidate with the fewest votes in the history of the Spanish Congress, with 124 votes in favor, 170 against, and 52 abstentions. He broke his own record set in 2016. The PSOE now has 2 days to negotiate an agreement to form a government before the next debate. Party activists hope to see a deal made with Unidas Podemos, who abstained during the session.
We have to speak about content and programs, rather than about who will sit on the blue seats. The ministers who sit on the bench won't be from PSOE or Unidas Podemos. They will be from a progressive, feminist, ecological and pro-European Spanish government.
Israeli forces have torn down houses that were too close to a segregation wall in the village of Sur Baher. 16 residential buildings were targeted to the south of Arab Jerusalem, holding around 100 apartments. Israel proceeded with the demolition despite international criticism after the Israeli Supreme Court agreed with the military that the buildings pose a security risk. The United Nations has said it laments the decision. Palestinians argue that the move is part of Israeli colonial policy, which seeks to build more illegal settlements on Palestinian land. Our correspondent in Cairo, Nayara Tardo, has more.
This Tuesday, the Arab League put out a statement condemning the Israeli demolition campaign against Palestinian homes in Sur Baher, on the edge of East Jerusalem. The Assistant General Secretary of the Arab League for Palestinian Affairs, Saed Abu Ali, said that this campaign is part of Israel's policy to expand the illegal Jewish settlements in Palestinian territory. The United Nations, during a meeting of the Security Council, also discussed the situation and called on Israel to halt the demolition immediately. The UN Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, gave his backing to the declarations by the UN Humanitarian Coordinator in Palestinian territories, Jamie McGoldrick, who sharply criticized the demolitions. The Israeli security forces moved into the community on Monday with mechanical diggers. They forced Palestinian families to leave their homes before placing explosives and demolishing at least 4 buildings.
We thank Nayara for that report. A shipment of ivory from Africa weighing about 9 tons has been seized in Indonesia. The ivory, worth about $13 million, is alleged to have been coming from the Democratic Republic of Congo and was headed to Vietnam. This is the second time this year that wildlife smugglers have been busted in Southeast Asia, as Singaporean authorities also seized tons of pangolin scales earlier this year. And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Abraham.